Hello, everybody. Welcome to our July 2024 Power BI quarterly convening. How's everyone doing today? All right. Well, thumbs up work as well. Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us. For this session, we do have two guest speakers, and we have some updates in terms of data resources that we've provided in the resources site for our Fabric webpage. So hello everyone and welcome again to our third quarterly meeting. Let's go ahead and kick things off by introducing our moderators. We have Jaime, we have Katie, Dan, and myself. And these convenings, just in case this is your first time joining us, they are a dedicated space for California community college researchers and Power BI users to, one, share expertise, and number two, dive into collaborative learning. And this convening is an opportunity to discuss challenges, discover new techniques, and see how Power BI talents are leveraging some of the coolest features. Today's topics. So our last quarterly survey highlighted a strong interest in foundational Power BI concepts for beginners in our community college space. So today we're addressing that with our two meeting topics. Our first speaker is Emilia Michaels Ratliff, and she's a research analyst at Folsom Lake College. She will outline concepts of design and color formatting and button navigation. A little bit about Emilia. She's been using Power BI for about 8 years at her college, and at her last accreditation cycle, they were commended for their exemplary use of data dashboards. So I'll go ahead and let her take over. You should be able to share your screen.
Hi, everyone. Let's see if I can get this up. I need to apologize today. I was trying to remote in so that things would look a little clearer than they might look in my slideshow here. So I can actually go into the software because I'm remote today and it's not on my laptop. So we'll see how the screenshots, Google likes to compress things. But I'll switch back and forth between what dashboards I have on our Power BI server to hopefully illustrate some of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to go through just a few. I'm going to talk about my top 5 design and visual tips. Go through those and hopefully illustrate some. And I'm really taking this just from like David mentioned, for beginners, kind of some foundational stuff, some things I noticed as I got started that I think are really helpful to think about from an overall and a top-down perspective, and I think from a user experience perspective as well. So when I thought about this, what I would think of is my top 5, thinking about the design of a dashboard. I laid them out. My top 5, and I'm really going to be focusing on probably the bottom 3 here, just in our short time this morning, is when I'm approaching a dashboard is to have that guiding focus or story. And I can't really coach you on that today, but I always go in, and this helps me with my design, is same with any analysis. What is the story we're trying to tell? We're not just dumping data out there, although sometimes I feel like I get a request and that's what it is. What is the data? Put the numbers out there. But what is the analysis? What are we trying to lead somebody's eye to? And that's going to help me figure out what tools do I want to use to push that forward. Then comes all the query work, and that's an entirely different presentation. We could talk about what query are we building? How are we going to do that? Is this a live pull? Are we pulling it into an Excel? Is it a flat data file? How are we building that query? And then what are we using to build just calculations within PBI? Because some of that can be design work too, which we could have a whole different conversation. Then we get to the design work and how are we laying out a visual design. So I want to run through some quick tips there that I think can make it hopefully make things look much cleaner and neater when you have a finished product. Once you've pulled all your data in, you're looking at it and you want to make something that is easy to use, easy to navigate, and hopefully tells the story that was your intention all along for the end user. So my third one really has to do with using color effectively. The fourth is how you can be clever with tooltips when maybe you have a bunch of data and you don't want to just keep pulling out charts, or you have something that you want to tell a user and maybe don't know how to pull, where to put it. And then just to keep in mind, what's the user experience of your entire report if you have multiple pages, etc. So the tips with color use that I'll go over a couple of them is obviously too much color can overwhelm. So keeping in mind high contrast and where you need to go to draw the eye for considering where you need your viewers to look. I think this is also anytime we're building a report. Specific with Power BI though, it is possible to customize all of the colors in there with specific hex codes. So one thing I do when I'm designing is it may be possible to go directly to your public services and marketing department if they have a style guide. We have a fabulous one at Folsom. I'm lucky there. I can get the hex codes directly, plug them into any report I'm doing, and have the specific colors for Folsom Lake College build my charts. So this is what I was talking about. I'm sorry, it's very blurry there. I'll go over to reports. So these are Folsom Lake College colors that are building a chart for me. I will tweak them if they're not doing the contrast I want or if it's too many colors. But just doing that simple step to put those hex codes in and have the color is already matching our school colors, and it's already building some contrast in. So if you've gone into the chart and you're going in to tweak it, this is where I wanted to go into the software to be able to do it, but I can't do it now, not remoting in. And you're tweaking the colors there for your data chart. You can actually tweak the hex codes when you put in a custom color. Conditional formatting is a bigger one that I would dive a little deeper on for drawing the eye. So when you add a value into any chart or table, you can do it just for like bar charts as well. I do it more often in tables because or matrices where you tend to have lots of numbers showing. You can click right on that value that you've added and you'll see this conditional formatting, and you can click on it and it'll give you the option to change the values, the font color, the background color. You can change it by a lot of parameters there, so that as you're filtering it or as you're changing the data on the page, exactly what you want to highlight and draw the eye to will show up. So I've used this, and I'll show you in a second here. Actually, I can go to it. Let's see right now. Go. Did that switch over? Can everyone see that? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. So this is a tab of our student success, our equity data at Folsom Lake College. Actually, this is probably not the example I wanted. Let's go to this one. This is the enrollment report. So this is an enrollment report at Folsom Lake College. We'll go to another tab which shows it a little bit better. So this percent change tab has the conditional background formatting applied. So if deans are going in, this is a completed semester. We've got an old run date because it only goes out so long. But they can look at it and immediately see by colors where it's up or down. Thankfully, we've been doing really good with enrollment, so we're not seeing a lot. But if we wanted to look at an area and see right away where it's a particular area of courses, or even opening it up. It's not a great example there. Pick one that has more courses. You know, maybe the offerings were lower between last spring and this spring. Would be there can be good reasons for it, but they could see where it's under. Just immediately it would draw their eye to it by using that conditional formatting, so they're not having to scroll through just by that use of color. So it's a good way to use color to draw the eye to what you want it to see. Also, obviously, have changed the color in just a few other areas to point out this here, this here, this here, where they might want to see it. And that's just clicking right on the value. Did that go back to the slideshow? Sometimes it doesn't switch, so please feel free to stop me if it doesn't. This is when you click it up, what that looks like. Again, I apologize for the blurriness. I was trying to fix that, but then I wouldn't have audio. So there's a couple ways you can do conditional formatting. On here, this will say that it's a gradient, where because of the coloring of that particular report, I chose to go from the yellow to the Folsom blue. And you can choose by just a number, you can choose by percentage. I do it custom, otherwise it'll kind of automatically choose a format for you. This is where you would choose what column you're doing it on. So it's completely customizable when you go into the conditional formatting. You can also, by the way, the first one I went to, the success report, you can add little icons. So that's how you got those check marks and the exclamation point that I had right next to that equity and success. So tooltips is the other category here for, as we know, tooltips, when you hover over something, usually it's going to be the standard data for the value that you put in. It's just going to give you the number, but you can dump in all kinds of extra data that you want, and you can even create a custom calculated field to add in additional text data, anything that you want. So what's up here is an example of a tooltip. Down here where it says selected subject, course, location, these are calculated fields that I created so that it's showing what I want of the filters. So when you're like, what is in this bar? It's going to tell you what you filtered to, what filters you have applied. And when you hover the mouse pointer over, it's going to tell you everything about the data that's in this bar. So without building any extra charts, it's just telling you everything about the data that's in there in just a little condensed tooltip. To get a little bit more advanced there, you can build an entire extra tab of your report and format it as a tooltip that's hidden. And as long as you format it as a tooltip, you can drag that page of the report into a tooltip. This is one that I wanted to show you in the Power BI software that unfortunately I can't, but I just have a screenshot. This is a screenshot of what that looks like when this is another tab of a report that is dragged over as a tooltip. So on the chart, when you mouse over it, all of this data pops up. This is a report that has counselor visits and shows what year the student came in to visit the counselor. Obviously, you can't format this by just typing the text in the tooltip, but if you build that table on another report and format as in a tooltip and drag that over, it's possible to do. So there's a lot of power in tooltips to keep your report clean. I didn't build a whole tutorial on this, but I'd be happy to show anyone. What I was going to talk a little bit more about is a little bit more simple. I do have a chat pop up. Would I recommend spending the time creating a theme using the university colors? If you're going to do it a lot, yes. If once you put the hex codes for the colors in for a specific, just one report you're building, they'll stay down there and you can recolor every chart in that report with just those colors. But obviously you'll probably be building more in one, and if you save it as that, then you can reuse it. Using a button with a tooltip can be a really handy way to draw the eye. And the way I will frequently use it, I'll use it a couple ways, but is to just add a little bit of text to give a definition or a little bit of an explanation. So buttons, you can use the insert tab, and then there will be a little drop down for button, and it gives you a few default choices of button types. And forgetting the type that I usually do, I think it's a like either an information or a help, where you get the little question mark or the exclamation point. And the button you have to set an action for first, which I usually leaving it on Q&A is fine, because the main thing you want to do if you're using it as a tooltip is the action has to be set to on, but you have to then put the tooltip to on after action is on. And that will allow you to type in a limited amount of text, but it's usually enough to say, hey, this is going on here, or this is the definition here. And I'll show you, go back to that same report. So for example, here is one on that enrollment report, and it's just a little question mark. And when you mouse over it, it's just, oh, by the way, the enrollment numbers for the day are compared to the equivalent day the prior year. And you can use the plus button to expand. So instead of creating a text box to take up more of the report space, it keeps it clean and allows them to get that information. So it's a way of also keeping the user experience in mind, and it's attention grabbing because they can want to know if they can push on it, but as soon as they do, it'll just pop up for them. So speaking of user experience, just a couple of thoughts there. I think we've kind of been talking about it all along, but some of the things that I keep in mind when I go through design are keeping filters really clean, easy to find, easy to use. Sometimes I try to think about what type of filter. This one's a balancing thing, because sometimes you're working with your users. They're requesting things from you and they want so much, or maybe you need to put in so much. So, you know, maybe a simple clickable binary filter is not always possible, and you may have big drop-down ones. So how clean can you make your design? That's always the challenge. But the cleaner and the easier to use is going to be better on the user experience. And then think about your data labels. You know, if you haven't already built it into your query, it is possible when you're in desktop to change them. Every time you right click on there, it'll say rename this for visual for Power BI. I forget what it says now. But here's, you can just see an example of this long data name, you know, that I know what it means. But if it's showing up in your visual, somebody may be like, I don't, you know, that's ugly to me. So I've just changed it to just location, just modality, just keeping them really clean. So these are kind of the cleaning at the end that's going to improve the experience. And it seems really easy, but I've seen lots of dashboards where they don't get cleaned up. And if I don't understand the data on the dashboard, then I know somebody who's probably doesn't work with data is probably really not going to understand, right? And then navigation. So obviously we have to name our tabs if we're using tabs, and then we can go a step further and we can again use those buttons to put in navigation buttons and hyperlinks if we want. That's another step you can take, depending on the complexity of the report. Buttons are pretty cool. And then the final thing is thinking about bookmarks. So I use, well, bookmarks and buttons. So it may, if you have a lot of filters, it may behoove you to put in a way to clear all those filters out. I almost always do this, and this can be done with either a simple, just last year, I think they added in the option to add a button that's just a clear all slicers or clear all filters button. Some of the reports that I've built existed before they added that in, which was a pain in the butt. And the only way to do it was to add in, the only way that I'm aware of at least, was to use a button, set a bookmark, and tag that bookmark to the button. So most of mine still have that. You can do it either way now. And under that same add a button menu, you'll see one now that says clear all slicers. You can either do that and then customize how it looks with all of the usual customizable options, or you can add a button to any style you like and add a bookmark, which is under the view menu. There's bookmarks and you just add one, keeping in mind that whenever you add a bookmark, it's going to bookmark whatever you currently have on that page. So make sure your filters are set up how you want, make sure things look like what you want, just like when you're in a book, bookmark it, name it, like I have my name for the particular pages, then you tag that bookmark to the action on that button, and then you can link it to like a reset button is what I've done. And whenever the person clicks that reset button, if they have filters applied, it'll go back to that reset state. The benefit still to this is that you can choose to maybe have a default filter applied. Like if you wanted the default state to be on a particular term, or say if you're at a district with a particular college selected or whatever you wanted, you could choose what the default state was. But those are ultimately two ways to make a reset button for your users, in case they go in and they click a bunch of things and they're like, I don't know what I did. They always have a reset. So I think those are the bulk of kind of some general tips that I tend to use thinking about most of my design work. I know that's kind of a quick and dirty rundown, but I would be happy to go back and show you anything or take any questions right now.
I believe Stephen has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Amelia. I I love your background, by the way, The Office, Stanley in the background. It's classic. Um, I had a question about like kind of standardization in the office for your designing. Do you have like set conventions, naming conventions, and things that you? I know you said that the college has their own kind of design and graph. We have that as well, but when you're designing dashboards and you have multiple people, designing dashboards at the same time, do you guys have set standards that you follow?
Yeah, well, in my office, I'm the only one who designs dashboards, so I guess that makes it easier. We do have a style guide from our marketing team. But that has mostly to do with so logos, general fonts, and colors. But that's basically it. Other than that, it mostly would leave it up to me, and then I would run everything by the team. So following those kind of general rules and principles. Yeah, if you're working with more people designing dashboards, I would definitely try to align things.
Thank you.
I also had a question I wanted to kind of throw out there. So for filters, oftentimes I grapple with, should I hide them? Should I make them visible? And sometimes it's difficult because some of the names are very descriptive. So I would have to extend the actual length of the of the width of the filter so you can read all the descriptions in there. Have you dealt with any of those issues yourself?
You mean the names of the underlying data, or let's see, go to one that has like a lot of filters. Like this is from the equity lens, so it was hard to, and then you work sometimes with stakeholders and they just want more and they want more, and you get in this place where it's just like, I want it clean, and they're like, can you add this? So do you mean the underlying data categories or the name?
Right. So like right there, you have filters and they're, you know, taking up, I would say, a good amount of real estate on the page. So deciding, how do I make it streamlined so that, people don't see just filters. I think that's, yeah, exactly my point. So if there's, let's say, 15 filters, how do you fit that into a page, or grapple with how do I show this so that it's readable, but at the same time, it's accessible?
Yeah, and I fight with that too. Yeah, I fight with that in this very report, because it's the compromise for me was, okay, so two categories. So we have folks that are filtering down by course area and then student area. And going back to the story was, okay, and when I talk to people about this is equity data, and it's, no matter what, it's from a racial equity lens. So that's why we have your racial data here, and this is a timeline view, and that's all you're going to see. And over here, you can filter by student characteristics, and these are the student characteristics that we primarily are looking at from the student equity standpoint. And over here, you are able to filter down so we can see in different departments and different courses. And so that's the story, and that's what you can see. And so when people start talking about, well, can we see this? I say, that's a different story. So that's how we start talking about it. We talk about the story first, because it is a lot of filters, but the filters end up existing for the story when we talk about it that way.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing. I learned a lot, actually, and I love the conditional formatting. So thank you for sharing that as well. Do we have any other questions for Amelia? Okay. Well, thank you for sharing again. I'm going to go ahead and transition us over to our second speaker. Our second speaker is Dr. Stephen Butler. He's our Interim Dean of Institutional Effectiveness and Strategic Planning at RCCD. He's going to chronicle his use with Power Query Editor and data wrangling. So a little bit about Stephen. He's originally from the Southern California region. He's worked previously at Maricopa Community College District and Allen Hancock College as a researcher. And Stephen is a firm believer in self-teaching and figuring things out. The internet is a strong curiosity, and the best teachers are anyone that can have that. Okay, Stephen, go ahead. I believe you're muted.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Great. David was like, "There's something you want to share with them this morning while I introduce you." I'm like, well, I believe in figure things out." So it was good. So my name's Stephen Butler. I'm going to kind of talk about my use of Power Query and starting that as as a beginner into Power BI, how it was helpful. So a little bit about me. David said, I worked at Maricopa Community College before the district before this, and then Allen Hancock College before that. they're both Tableau user schools. So Tableau was the visualization tool that I had the most experience with. Especially at Maricopa Community College District, we had the enterprise server, and it was everything was on Tableau. Allen Hancock, we had Office 365 as well, so we had the Fabric and Power ability. We didn't have the subscription for Power BI, but I was able to use a lot of the. I was able to use Power Query a lot, and I'll kind of explain how I use Power Query a lot outside of using Power BI, and it kind of helped me get into the use of Power BI. So when Dave was like, "Oh, where this is going to be like a beginner's," where I thought it was kind of apt for me to talk about, my journey using Power BI, because I'm fairly new actually to building stuff with Power BI. I've only really started building Power BI stuff since February. I've used like I said, Power Query, Power Apps, and so a bunch of the Power Suites in 365 before prior to this, but we always use Tableau as our visualization. So when I was using, can you see my, I don't want to go, can you see the slides? Just make sure your thumbs up. Yeah, cool. Thank you. So one of the things that led me into using Power Query was that I had to, we were transitioning from a new vendor for our student learning outcomes assessment. And so we needed to get the data out of our old vendor and make a historical, static data file basically for all of our old data of the outcome. So it was like 10 years out of this one vendor. And when I talked to the vendor, they wouldn't give me the raw data that we put in. It was only the reports that we were able to get at. They wanted to charge me a bunch of money for getting the raw data. I'm like, I don't think so. So we ended up getting all these reports out of it, but they were very different in their aggregation and the level that they were going at. So I had course learning outcomes, program learning outcomes, institutional learning outcomes, all different reports, different levels of aggregation with those. And then I had all the mappings that were being pulled out of there for course mappings and outcome mappings for that. And then we also had the scores as well for each one of those course outcomes. And then we had used Curriculum for our curriculum. So it was kind of like, how do I integrate all these different pieces? I had tons of static files. How do I bring them all together? And I didn't want to do like a billion VLOOKUPs in Excel and bring them all together. So that little get data button is super helpful. That brought up the Power Query piece, and so it's used in Excel. So I was able to basically clean everything in Power and bring everything into a standard like values, different. So everything was, I had to remove all bunch of different, punctuation, different kinds of things from using the Power Query tool, and that was really helpful for being able to do that. And I put it all into just a couple tables that I was then able to put into a visualization, and actually have that data, especially for our accreditation, which was coming up. So it was very helpful. And then we moved to a new vendor, and then I had to take all that and format that into the import files that they wanted and then put them into the new vendor. So it was, back and forth for that. But Power Query was super helpful in doing that. I also, Power Apps is down here. I don't know how many of y'all use Power Apps. That was something that I enjoy using quite a bit. It was, it's basically creating a user interface for different data. And so Power Query was cool because I could build the Power App to collect data, use I forgot what it was called, Flow. It's the automate and put it to shove it into a static file, and then the static file would operate Power Query and put it into the reports that I needed. So very I didn't know how to do any of this when I first started, so it was all Google was my friend basically. So a little bit about Power Query and some things that I'm going to talk about. So very beginner stuff moving forward is basically cleaning the data, learning how to replace values, changing data types, trimming data, cleaning the data, removing all the paragraph signs and everything from it. Using the transform to change the data up or lower, capitalize, all that fun stuff. And then when you can also use it for pivoting data, I'll show you in a bit how I use it to split the columns and then pivot it into like a usable text analysis file. There's all sorts of different things that you can do. The only thing that I find really difficult with Power Query, if you overuse it, which I have quite a bit, because I was like, oh, I'll just add another piece. I'll add another piece into it. It can get big really quick, and so it starts to get pretty slow. So the more especially if you're working with SQL Server or Data Lake or something where you can query the data instead of using static files, the more you can do in that environment and then bring it in, probably the better. But sometimes you don't always have that option. Sometimes you're just bringing in static files and such. So a little bit of like what I'm going to be doing. So I created a dashboard for this to kind of showcase, a little bit of what I could use it for at a basic level. So I'm gonna go over how I cleaned the data, how I created some columns, both coded and uncoded, and I prepared a set of comments for text analysis using Power Query. So there's different ways to go through that. So I'm gonna take this off here. And you'll still see my screen with the dashboard and okay, cool. All right, so on the left here, this is the dashboard. So this was kind of the final product I've been working on. The data set that I used is this data set here. I used R to scrape Rate My Professor for Harvard University. So these are reviews and such that were scraped off that website. And you imagine if you're taking things off a website, it's going to be kind of messy. So you can see here, you have ID, name, university, which is basically the department. I don't know why I was bringing in that, but and then you have different kinds of metrics. You can tell by the way that some of these are stored. Some are being stored in as text, some are being stored in as numerical values. The date has this th, the st, like the inth and stuff on there, and Power Query doesn't like that. So there's quite a bit of like data cleanup after this, and I don't really want to go through and do it in Excel. So what I ended up doing is just throwing it into Power Query by using the get data part for the app so when you bring up Power Query, you have the get data piece and you can bring in the Excel workbook. And when you go to bring it in, you have the option to transform the data, and the transform brings you into this Power Query editor right here. So when you begin this, you'll have the queries, content on your side. So this is my original one. This is another one that I created as a duplicate of my original one, and then I brought in some other ones for my text analysis. I'm not going to go into all those, but these are the queries that you'll have. The top, you'll have different things that you can do, and on the right, this is where I found really important with like naming conventions and stuff. You have all these steps, and these steps can get really long if you're not using them, if you do them in different ways. So and make sure I name them as I go along. You see some I didn't name here, which I didn't really, it was just a lot. But so this is what it looks like when it comes in. It automatically promotes the headers into your headers. And then you have your original data. So you can see this looks the same. It brought in at the top, you can see it brings in the data as a string for the dates. It brings the numbers in as strings. It basically brought everything as strings, just kind of looking at what you need to clean up, right? Now, what I really wanted to do was a text analysis on this comment column more than anything else. But you can see on this comment, you have a lot of punctuation, different kinds of spaces going on. Profanity has been marked way. Like it's an interesting way to go about it. So first things first is like when you're using the cleaning data, I use these replace a lot. So I would come up here to the right, and first I tried to change this. I was like, I want a date. So if I wanted to change it to a date, it's going to give me an error because it doesn't like these THs and stuff in it. So I would go through, and one way one thing nice about Power Query is you kind of have an option to do manual steps, or there is that it takes M language as the coding, so you can actually code it. And if you look up here, this is like the main, this will tell you what's going on with the code for each step. You can figure out what kind of functions you need just by looking up there as well. So I would come up here, right click, and replace values. I already have steps here, so it's asking me, do I want to insert steps? And then I just put the value that I want to replace and hit OK, and it'll replace it with nothing, and it's just going to replace it. Replaces all those THs. I'm going to delete that step I have here because I already have that step right here. So TH, so I did that with all these. So I replaced TH, ST, RD, ND, and then once I did that, I have a date value that I can then transform into an actual date column without errors. So another way to do this is to, so that's a non-coded option, but there is a coded option as well you can do. I don't know if oh, this is my Notepad++. I wrote, so after I did this, you can come up here, you kind of see what are the functions that they're using to replace this data. So I found out their functions, and then I just go through and I create a conditional statement, and I can add a column, and I can create a custom column. I'm gonna insert it here, and I'm gonna put this in here. This is my conditional statement that I wrote for it. If it has an ST, give me the blank, essentially. Hit OK. And now, nope, it didn't like something. There it goes. Okay, because I replaced the TH after that. So now you can see on my left is my original column, on my right is my new column, and you can see all that stuff has been removed. So now I can make it into a date column. So that's one way to kind of clean up, is just using replace. Once you have like the data how you want to look at it, you can start transforming columns. So you can transform data types. So if you look over here, I changed all these. If you look, start here, they're ABC, they're string values, and then I transform them into number values. So you can do transform, or sorry, change type, and then change it to a different type. Same with the date value over here. You can hit change type and hit date, and then it'll transform it into a date. And that's what I did on that one right there. So now it changed that value to a date that Power BI likes to look at. So once I got that all set up, then I wanted to get into this comment section here and start cleaning that up. So first I put everything into lowercase because I want everything in the same case. And I did that by transform, lowercase. And these are all things you can do within language as well. Then I clean the text, which removes all the, if there's enters or tabs in there and stuff, it will remove that. And then I trim the text, which removes the spaces from each end. And then I started replacing values by replacing punctuation marks that I didn't want in there. So I did the same thing. And if you want it, you don't want to do this manually, you can write the code for it that will do it all at one time too. So after I replaced, and I get the comments to a place I like, then I wanted to create a column here. I have these two values here, quality and difficulty. I kind of wanted to mix them into two, so I have something that's high quality, high difficulty, high quality, low difficulty, that people could go through and look at the different departments and what they're mostly like. So I added a custom column here, and that custom column using this conditional statement. So if that quality is more than 3, then give me a high quality. If quality is more than 3, give me neutral quality. And then I concatenated it together. So I ended up getting another column here on the side that gives me if it's high quality or neutral, high quality, low, high neutral, and I can start to have that kind of custom. So that's essentially how I cleaned up. How am I doing on time, David? Am I going too far? Or?
Yeah, you're good. You got a few minutes.
Okay, so I'll go a little bit of the joining here. So this was my original piece of data that I had. So, but I wanted now I really want to just look at this comment data information and I want to analyze it. But I've done this before in Excel before this, where you just, you do text to columns and it gives you a column for each one, each word, and then you can pivot it, and then you have an ID with each one. So I really only want ID, like a professor ID and department and the comment on here. So what I did was I came over here and I created a duplicate. So I would go on to my thing and I would say duplicate. And basically that gives me another query that I can mess with and I can join back onto my old query if I want to. So you look over here, it duplicated all those steps that I had done in the original one, except now I can start doing more steps. I can keep my old one that I like, but I can keep doing more steps onto those things that I wanted to do. So like I wanted to get rid of all those columns that I didn't want. Then I reordered the columns. And then I split the columns by delimiter so I can come to that comment column and hit, you know, uh, split column by delimiter. So I split it by spaces. So it gives me every word on a different column. And you could do this with the text analytics here, this AI, this automatic version. Sometimes you don't need to do that. You could just use the text analytics, but I've used that text analytics before, and sometimes it gives me like positive sentiment when I want it, when actually I want a negative sentiment, other word. So sometimes I don't like to use it. So I split it and then I changed some types, did a little bit of more cleaning. And then once I have it the way I like, then I unpivot it. And now I have a value now I have it by row. I have each one of those columns. So I took all these comments, Control Shift, and select them all. And then I can pivot them. Go to unpivot, transform, unpivot columns, and it's going to give me this, where now I have a row. I have a row for each one of those words, and then I can start working with that more, cleaning it more. And then what I did is these merge queries. I was like, well, now I need to get rid of all the stop words. So then I found a data set that I like for stop words. So I bring that in. Then I merge it with this one, with my comment analysis, and I can bring in the stop words. If I have all the stop words and get rid of them by filtering those out. So then you can, once you have that data look the way you like, you bring sentiment analysis, you can bring in all sorts of different things and start joining that. And once you have it in Power Query, then you can start bring those queries into your data here and start working with it. I did this. It took me, a few hours to do all that, like figure all that out, but it was definitely worth it, and it's kind of interesting, an easy way to go out and clean, especially with you working with static files, to clean up that information. I'm gonna stop there. I don't want to go too much into it, but you can see Power Query can be the editor can be, very easy to use, basic, or you can, have the code where you're directly, writing the M language into the main code that they're using. So it can be, so for basic users, I feel like it's a good tool to be able to use in order to clean stuff that they might not have. So I think that's all I have right now for it. Yeah, there's my final product. I mean, not final, but it's just a, slapped it together. I also did this one too. I started playing with doing departments by difficulty and quality and having them scatter plot across with the different ones. That was kind of interesting to see which faculty had more ratings and higher ratings and such, and where they fell on here. Anyways. Questions?
Yeah, I have one. Lawrence Andrews, research analyst at Victoria College. So I know you talked about bloating when you start adding all those different data sources in your reports. Have you considered making a Power BI report with no visuals on it, saving it, and then importing it into another Power BI thing? So you build off of that using that as your data model. We do that here at Victor Valley, and it actually cuts down a lot on the bloat.
Oh, I've
It's really cool.
never done that before. You have to, there's your next session. You just volunteered to lead how to do that. I've never done that. One thing I do like about Power Query though is so we were doing our strategic plan dashboard for a college, and we have a bunch of that we can't work off of the same dashboard really easily. So um, a lot of work was bringing in different queries for these different metrics we were doing, and so one thing I do like about it is you can copy and paste queries from book to book or report to report, and that way you don't have to do all that in multiple times. If you already have the Power Query done in one of your things, you can copy and paste that query into another one, which is kind of nice to do.
That is nice. Yeah. With the method I mentioned, you just update that single source on the Power BI side, so you bring in all those queries, and then it just powers all your other reports. It's actually really cool.
Yeah, I'd love to see that, how to do it. Uh, I'd love to see how to do that.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing, Stephen. That was very insightful. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and transition us to the final stage of our meeting today. So I'm gonna go ahead and type something in the chat. I want to go ahead and get a poll going as to some of the topics that we can talk about for the next time and for future meetings. So I created this Mentimeter poll. It does break out into several major areas in Power BI that we can focus on. So we have, if you, let's see here. So if you look at the poll, we have like visuals, data connectivity using Power Query. So those are some of the major areas. Let me share my screen so we can get a better look at this. Okay. Okay, so here's the QR code if you're not able to log in via the chat HTML. I'll give everyone some time to log in. I think we have a few people in there. So while that's kind of getting finalized, I do want to also provide some of the resources that we were talking about earlier. So if you follow the listserv, there was a Google Drive that was shared, and that's a repository where researchers like yourself can place some of the Power BI reports that you found helpful and you want to share with the community. So if you log into the Fabric site, there's a resource link there, and that's where you can find the Google Drive. You can upload some reports. You can see what's on there. There's things relating to equity, student success. It's very insightful. So hopefully we can grow that source and get some reports that we can easily share with one another. That's one of the resources. I also provided a, let me see if I can put that in the chat. So there was a resource link PDF that I put together, and it just has some of the great resources you can use to learn Power BI. Some of them are YouTube channels, others are like official Microsoft content and so forth. And I'm going to go ahead and drop that in the chat. You can use that and look over those if you ever have any questions outside of this space. Go ahead and get that in here. And I'll go ahead and get the poll started right about now. Okay. So here's what we have. Let me go ahead and actually start it, presenter. Okay. Okay. So if you look at this here, this is where we are in terms of what people voted. So 5 is data modeling. Okay, that's a big one. Okay, so it looks like it's shifting. So the way this works is you rate the impact of your work on some of these areas. So let's say visuals is something that for your office is going to be very important, and then you rate your proficiency. So that here puts it on a 4x4 matrix, and we can see, which areas we should probably focus on. So it looks like there's a little bit of everything. So that's going to help us figure something out for the next sessions. If you want to type in the chat a specific area within those, so let's say you want to learn more about like buttons or bookmarks, go ahead and type those up, and we can create a more tailored approach to this. But I'll go ahead and share this with everyone as well, so that we can create some stuff that's helpful. So it looks like it's kind of a little bit of everything, which is great. Good to know. Okay. Before we wrap up, I do want to also let the other moderators speak to any of these points, see if they want to share anything before we close out for our next session, which is going to be, I want to say October 9th. So yes, it's going to be October 9th at 10 a.m. Yes. So any final thoughts, questions?
No additional comments on my end, just thanking everyone, and just to echo what David shared. Yeah, feel free to utilize the fabrics page. I'll go ahead and share the fabrics page that he referred to. As of right now, there's only 22 members. And so the neat thing is if you go ahead and sign up, you'll automatically get updates when things are uploaded or when messages are sent out. So really the different means of communication includes the Fabric page and then also the Power BI listserv. And again, you're always going to be getting communication through the Power BI listserv if you're on the listserv, which I trust all of you are. But again, the Fabrics page is another means to get the word out, in other words, and for you to receive it. So yeah. And then lastly, shout out to Millie and Steven. Thank you.
And just a small update, I believe the next session is October 24th, unless we changed it and I completely
Right.
forgot.
That sounds great. Thank you everybody for joining us. I will
that's what's
provide
listed
the
on the
PowerPoint
Fabric
from
site.
Amelia on the Fabric site, so you can have that as a resource as well. And if you have any questions for any of us, feel free to reach out. And until next time, folks.